Sure. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you all. Thank you very much to Jim and Ellen, and I'm happy to be able to spend some time with the Canadian Unitarian Universalist group, the Social Action Committee. And nice to hear all of the good work that you're doing across the country. And it's also nice to see some friendly faces like Marie out in Halifax. So I'm speaking to you from Waterloo, Ontario. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples of the Grand River. I have a few slides that I'd like to share. I understand that you have had an opportunity to see my presentation that I gave just after I came back on this epic tour of Egypt, Russia, Finland, Latvia, Poland, and Romania. It was called Climate Conflict and the Search for Peace. But today, just over the next 20 minutes, I would like to share some of the recent things that I've been involved in. And so I'm going to share my slides now here for you. Okay, and let's get up to the first slide. So, oops, let me just stop that for a second. It should be to this one. Okay, so I heard Jim and Ellen talk to you about their work with the homeless encampments in Kitchener. I was just there actually yesterday with my husband, dropping off blankets and pillows and food and hand sanitizer and spending some time. I've been out there a few times, and this is at the beginning of January when we didn't have any snow. We just had a big dump of snow. And many of the tents are broken down now because of the weight of the snow that we had over the last week. And it's really cold here in Kitchener, Waterloo, and the people are really very cold. So it's terrible. And knowing the extent of the poverty in this country and the increase in food bank, it really drives the work that I'm doing for peace and trying to call on the Canadian government to cut military spending and to end the war. So I just wanted to show you this picture. And then I wanted to tell you that just before the holidays, we got news, it was in the mainstream media, that the federal government was going to make an announcement about buying the F-35 fighter jet. And we had been working as a coalition called the No Fighter Jets Coalition to prevent the federal government from investing in a new fleet of fighter jets. So our coalition, when we got this news just before Christmas, we mobilized over the holidays to plan this week of action, drop the F-35 deal. And we had rallies and protests across the country, from Victoria, British Columbia, out to Halifax, Nova Scotia, from January 6th to January 8th. We had about 20 actions across the country, and I'd like to show you some pictures. And you can see from our announcement of this weekend of action, we were urging Canadians to get out on the street, to contact their member of parliament, to say to the federal government, don't go forward with this purchase. And you can see that we have call on the Trudeau government to spend billions on human needs, not on warplanes. So this was the action in our capital, right on Parliament Hill, defund warplanes. And then this was a creative action in Toronto. This is Murray Lumley. He is meeting with his member of parliament, Neil Erskine Smith, and you can see he's got these billboards on his chest. Think of my grandchildren and yours. The F-35 fighter jets put their futures at risk. And then you can see on the back, F-35s can't solve the climate crisis, homelessness, inequality, poverty, etc. This is us in Waterloo in front of our Member of Parliament's office, Bardish Chagger. No fighter jets, green jobs, not war jobs. And this is in Cambridge, outside of Brian May's office, the Liberal MP. He also is the Parliamentary Secretary for Defense. And you can see our signs say no fighter jets, they harm people and the atmosphere. They are definitely exacerbating the climate crisis. The fighter jets burn in one long-range flight the same amount of fuel as a vehicle does, as a car that we drive, you know, in an entire year. They're extremely carbon intensive. And then this is out in Hamilton, no fighter jets, no to NATO. It's really our membership in NATO that is driving Canada's defense procurement. The reason why we're buying fighter jets and why we're building warships and why we're buying attack helicopters and armed drones. And you can see our signs, cut military spending, let's fund instead a care economy, affordable housing, climate action, green jobs, and Indigenous reconciliation. This is an example of a graphic that we circulated during this weekend of action, and you can see the opportunity cost, you know, of investing in a new fleet of fighter jets. 88 is going to cost 70 billion over their lifetime, over 30 years, but you know, we could be investing instead in education and in affordable housing, ending homelessness across the country, and investing in climate action. You know, we are facing, as Marie said, catastrophic climate change, and it's getting worse. I was just in Egypt for COP27, and I sat in a room where the IPCC scientists were giving an update on the state of the climate crisis, and they said, we're not on track to reduce emissions and meet the Paris Agreement. And so they were urging countries to upscale their effort to be more ambitious in what they're doing because the climate crisis is getting so much worse. And so, you know, instead of investing in fighter jets, we could be investing in renewable energy, in preparing our communities for climate resilience. So we were very discouraged that the day after our weekend of action, we didn't know when the federal government was going to make this announcement, but it was that Monday, January 9th, that our Defense Minister, Anita Anand, gave a press conference in the morning and said that Canada was going to go forward and buy the first lot of 16 F-35 fighter jets for $7 billion, and that over the next about decade, we're going to buy all 88 for a life cycle cost of at least $70 billion. And in her press conference, she claimed that this purchase was the best deal for Canada and that these fighter jets are affordable and reliable. Well, I know a lot about this fighter jet because I have been actually working to stop the Canadian government from buying these fighter jets for 13 years. In fact, it's because of the peace movement mobilizing over the past 13 years that Canada delayed the purchase of these fighter jets. All of our allies like the UK, Australia, Netherlands, Belgium, they've all invested in the F-35 years and years ago, but because of our resistance, because of our opposition, you know, we delayed the federal government buying it until now. I was hoping that we were going to succeed and stop it, but you know, we weren't able to, but we're still trying to prevent more fighter jets from being bought. But anyhow, because I have been working on this issue for 13 years, I know a tremendous amount about this warplane. And I know that the claims that these fighter jets are reliable and affordable are just absolutely not the case. So I published this article, and I'll send the link in the chat if you haven't read it. I won't go through it with you, and we can maybe discuss it more in the question and answer if you like, that these fighter jets are totally unreliable and not affordable. Last year, the US Government Accountability Office released 2 reports that showed that these fighter jets are still faced with over 800 open deficiencies. They are not at full rate production because they're so unreliable and so poorly performing. And the engines are terrible. There's only one engine, and they're terrible. So they haven't been designed to really protect our sovereignty. What why Canada is really buying these fighter jets is to ensure our defense relationship with the United States and to meet our obligations with NATO and NORAD. But what that should mean is for us to question our continued membership in NATO and NORAD if we're buying fighter jets that are so unreliable and so unaffordable. The other thing that we did during this weekend of action is release a new parliamentary petition. This is our third one, calling on the federal government to drop the F-35 deal. And I'll put a link in the chat, and I would like to please encourage you to sign this petition and to get all of your friends and family to sign it, because we're collecting signatures until March 6th, and we really need to try to get about 5,000 signatures. We'd really like to get more than we've had in the past. And so, you know, we're making this case again that the federal government is presented with a choice. We invest in new American warplanes that exacerbate the climate crisis and derail our ability to end homelessness and poverty in Canada, or we invest in the needs of Canadians. So this is why this petition is really important. We'll hope that you sign it. And you can also get involved in our campaign, the No Fighter Jets Coalition, which is nofighterjets.ca. That's our petition. And there's one aspect about these fighter jets that we have tried to raise the alarm about, and that is the F-35 has been designed to carry a nuclear bomb. This is a tactical B-61-12 bomb, and we're very concerned because this is a smaller bomb that is laser guided. There is a greater temptation to use this nuclear weapon, and the fact that Canada is buying these F-35s with no condition that we will not fly with a nuclear weapon in these fighter jets, it actually is a violation of Canada's obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Canada was one of the first countries to sign the NPT back in like 1968. And so for us to buy these fighter jets without a condition that they'll never have a nuclear weapon on it is very concerning to us. Now, last year, President Biden released his nuclear posture review, and it says very clearly, I've put a quote on the slide here, that the F-35 is part of the United States nuclear weapons architecture. And that's the same with Trump's 2018 nuclear posture review and with Obama's 2010 nuclear posture review. All of them talk about the fact that the F-35 stealth fighter has been designed as a nuclear weapons delivery vehicle. So this is another reason why we need to absolutely oppose the fighter jets. So you might have been aware that January 22nd was the second anniversary of the coming into force of a new important UN treaty called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. 2 days later was the announcement from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the doomsday clock moving now 90 seconds to midnight, the closest the doomsday clock has ever been. Canada is not signing the TPNW because of our membership in NATO. So again, this really should cause us to reflect, you know, is this nuclear armed military alliance something that's really providing us security to Canada, or is it exacerbating insecurity in the world? So I just want to end in the next few minutes by telling you quickly about my trip to Ottawa this past week. I was there from last Saturday to Wednesday. I gave a talk at a community center and at Carleton University with a couple of other panelists. The title of the talk was "The War in Ukraine, Paths to Peace?" ? And this is with our banner, "No to NATO, yes to peace and cooperation." I actually brought this banner with me on my big tour to Egypt and to Eastern Europe. And one of the things that I mentioned in my presentation at the community center and at Carleton University is I brought this really important article to people's attention, and I will put a link to it in the chat as well. This was published last January by Dr. Ivan Kachanovsky. He's a Ukrainian-Canadian professor of political science at the University of Ottawa, and he's done extensive research into the protests of the Maidan in Kyiv in 2014 and into the Odessa massacre as well. And what his research shows was that Ukrainian neo-Nazi forces were involved in the coup in 2014 and into the Odessa massacre. But also very concerning is that Canada was involved in the coup as well in 2014 and in the Maidan protests. I'm happy to talk more about this in the Q&A, but I would like to strongly encourage you to read this article. I met with Dr. Kachanovsky while I was in Ottawa and had a conversation with him about it. And he's very concerned that there has been no inquiry into Canada's role into the coup, because the coup in 2014 in Kyiv has led to the crisis and the war today. The other thing that I want to let you know about is in my presentations in Ottawa, I tried to refute the claim that Canada is this war in Ukraine is being fought over democracy. Our Defense Minister, Anita Anand, last fall said at the Toronto Metropolitan University to students, she said that Ukraine is on the front lines of defending democracy. And then a week and a half ago in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum, you can see a panel there. There's our Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland. She gave a presentation on the panel, and again was saying that Ukraine is in a fight for democracy and freedom. And she said that Ukraine is doing a magnificent job. She did not say once on the panel, make any reference to the thousands and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians that have been injured and killed in this war, the houses and the civilian infrastructure that has been destroyed, and the millions of Ukrainian refugees that have had to flee, this terrible war. There was no mention of that at all. Instead, all of the panelists were escalating this crisis. So the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on the panel that all of the NATO allies, including Canada, were going to be sending more weapons to Ukraine to prolong the war and suffering. But he said that weapons are the way to peace. And we really need to challenge this thinking. I want to bring two resources to your attention. One is this book by William Blum. He worked for the US State Department in the 1960s, and then he resigned in protest over the war in Vietnam. And he became a fierce critic of US foreign policy, and he wrote a number of books. The last book that he published before he died was this one, America's Deadliest Export, Democracy, The Truth About US Foreign Policy and Everything Else. In the preface of this book, it was published in 2015. The preface is all about the US role in the coup and in the crisis in Ukraine and what the United States had been doing in Ukraine for 20 years. So I bring that book to your attention, and I also bring this important book by Stephen Cohen, and I did mention it in my speech last fall. It's called War with Ukraine, ? It provides the crucial backstory to this current terrible war in Ukraine. And then finally, I want to say that this war in Ukraine is causing military spending to go up, and it's enriching the weapons manufacturers. This was from a news article just yesterday. As the war rages, military spending and weapons exports are increasing. And you can see over the past year that all of the US weapons manufacturers, their stock prices have increased 40 to 50%. They are making a lot of money. they are really making a killing off of all of this killing. And then just this past week, what did our defense minister do? Again, escalating this crisis. Canada is now going to be sending more tanks to Ukraine, along with all of the other weapons we've sent. Do you know we've sent hand grenades, sniper rifles, machine guns, ammunition, rocket launchers? Canada has sent over $1.5 billion in weapons to Ukraine. So in my presentations in Ottawa, I gave some examples of, paths to peace, a truth and reconciliation process, a new architecture for security that builds on these initiatives from the United Nations that came out 2 years ago called Our Common Security. The International Peace Bureau also launched an important new initiative last year called Common Security, Our Shared Future. There are things that we can do to end this war and to bring about peace and security. And then finally, to let you know that we are trying to rebuild and strengthen the peace movement in this country. We are going to be joining forces with the British peace movement, the European peace movement in an international weekend of action, February 24th to February 26th. It's going to be Peace Now, Stop the War, Stop NATO. We hope that you will join us and get out on the streets and let's call on the Canadian government to stop sending weapons and to start negotiating. So that's all that I would like to say right now, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion and to hear your questions and comments. Thanks a lot.